Hi, everybody. I'm Gwendolyn Sterk, and today we are on a topic that we all need and can utilize. It's on fair credit. So today we're going to welcome Jim Smith. He's an attorney here in Illinois and works in Orland Park. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Gwen. I appreciate it.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about what it means to be fair credit attorneys at your firm?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Jim Smith, and I have a partner. His name's Richard Doherty, and we created a law firm. I guess the boring name is Doherty Smith LLC, but what we do business as is fair credit attorneys. And what we've learned is that there are a lot of people out there that have inaccurate information on their credit reports. So we spend most of our time litigating in federal court under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, trying to correct people's errors and getting them paid in the process.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, a lot of people, it's not necessarily their fault, or it's just a situation that evolved, correct? It's just something that needs to be dealt with.
Absolutely. So, you could think of how many people there are in America that are 18 years old and have credit. There's a lot of us, and the credit reporting agencies have to keep track on that on a monthly basis, and they make mistakes constantly. And there's a dispute process that you can use, and they screw that up too because they're too busy. So there's a lot of errors, and they don't get fixed.
So are these the typical type of cases that you take at your firm, or are there other areas as well?
Yes, this is the typical situation. So it'd be identity theft issues where things are on your credit report that you have no idea what they are. There are mixed file issues. So, my name's James Michael Smith. If there's another James Michael Smith out there, and there's a few of us, if somebody's credit gets merged or mixed with mine, that's called a mixed file. Those are things we handle. And then oftentimes they're just flat out errors. Somebody has a Honda lease and they paid it off, but it's showing 30 days late, but they paid it on time. Or there's some sort of debt where it says there's a $10,000 balance, but they paid it off years ago. The balance should be $0. We'll help people sort of navigate through that through the Fair Credit Reporting Act.
Interesting. I've always said that your credit is one of your most valuable assets. Would you agree with that, and why?
I would agree with that, and it's getting more and more important. If you talk with mortgage brokers, your whatever ideal score is to get the best rates, I think has gone up 20 points. So it's getting harder and harder for people to get the best rates out there. So your credit score or your credit report needs to be better than ever. If you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a car, insurance, car insurance, everybody's looking at your credit. It's a hugely important part of our lives.
Sure. And especially in the area which we practice in, it's just divorce, we see a lot of issues. So off the top, what would be your recommendation, or what do you typically see as credit issues when somebody's going through a divorce?
So the number one thing I think when somebody's going through a divorce is just to first understand what's on your credit. And what I mean by understand is if you have credit cards, are they in your name only? Are they in your name plus your spouse's name? Are they in your spouse's name and you're in a joint account holder, or are you an authorized user? You have to really have an understanding of what your sort of credit obligations are when you're going through a divorce, because the primary concern I see after divorce is over is that, my husband or my wife is supposed to be paying this credit card. It's no longer my responsibility per the divorce decree, but my ex-spouse isn't doing it. And now I've got this terrible rating on my credit report. Please help me. And there's not much you can do because that's an agreement between the ex-spouses and the divorce decree. The credit card company wasn't part of that. So that's a huge, probably the number one thing that I see is somebody with the false impression that they're no longer responsible for making payments just because there's a divorce decree saying somebody else should be making them.
Right. And, it's always my position that, when you're married, your spouse has all of your personal information. So they could go out during the pendency of a divorce as well and take out credit in your name, and you may not even know it. They may change an address. They may do something, and I'm not always saying that it's intentionally spiteful, although sometimes it is. And sometimes it's just something you didn't know about, or you don't recall that you had a credit card. Now it's run up. So how often would you suggest that somebody going through a divorce really run their credit to have a good understanding of it?
Every time. I think running it in the beginning of the divorce and before it's over, it should be run. And what you touched upon is also a common problem, and it's identity theft. Even though you're married, you're not allowed to use your spouse's social security number and name in order to open up credit card bills, and that's something that happens quite a bit. And also, spouses will use their children's identity in order to open up accounts. So if you have adult children, it might not be a bad idea to have them take a look at their credit before a divorce is finalized as well.
Right. And it's just, it's a scary proposition. I think you touched on something that's very interesting, because I think people don't understand that difference between what does it mean to have a joint account versus being an authorized user, and how does that appear on the credit report?
Sure. So the fundamental difference is you're obligated to make the payments, and one you're not. So if you're an authorized user, so if your spouse has a credit card with Capital One, and it's in the husband's name, and the wife is an authorized user, the wife is not legally obligated to make those payments. So if they're not being made, they shouldn't negatively be attributed to the wife or ex-wife. If you're a joint account holder, the wife is. And you will continue to be a joint account holder until you have it in writing with the credit card company that you're not anymore. So just because you got through a divorce, if the divorce decree indicates that the husband should be the one taking over payments, if you don't take the wife's name off of that joint account and he stops making payments, all of that negative credit payment history will be sent to the wife. And, so that's the big difference. I also wanted to sort of very, very quickly, an unauthorized user or an authorized user account. We've recently, in certain situations, been filing lawsuits to remove the reporting of authorized user accounts. And what I mean by that is, if the wife is an authorized user and the husband stopped making payments, all of that negative stuff still gets sent to the wife's credit report, but there's a notation on the credit report that she's just an authorized user. And that's supposed to be okay, that the creditor reviewing the credit report is supposed to understand that, okay, I see all of this negative history on this credit card, but you're just an authorized user, so it's not supposed to negatively impact her, but it does. The reality is it's there and it's not helpful. So we've helped people take that information off of their credit reports and get paid in the process.
Very interesting. Now, if you have a joint credit card and one spouse is supposed to pay the credit card off, and say there is a $10,000 balance on it, I mean, you're still on the hook until they get that payment paid in full. So that's something you should be monitoring on a regular basis to ensure it's paid, correct?
Correct. Not only paid, but even if afterwards, if it's still open and you haven't been removed from the account, any future obligations on that credit card are jointly yours as well.
And if you're a joint owner of the card, do you have the ability to shut down the card for both you and the other user?
That's a good question. You could definitely get yourself off of the card. I'm not sure that you can shut it down altogether. That might be more of a credit card by credit card situation. But you certainly can contact the credit card company and remove yourself from the card. And it's quite possible that once that happens, the credit card company doesn't want to deal with just one person, maybe because their income is not high enough or whatever the case may be. So they shut it down anyway. But you certainly can call up and get yourself removed.
But it is possible that that remains on your credit. And so that's why we should be monitoring our credit on a regular basis. And if that occurs and you can't get it removed, that would be something that then they would go to you for, so that you could assist them in cleaning up that report. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So one big distinction that I do is I look for errors. So anything that's inaccurate on a credit report. And if we can find errors or inaccuracies, then I will work with them to get them removed. And if necessary, file a lawsuit.
Understand. And I think that's the biggest distinction that people need to understand. So, how can working with your family law attorney? So, for example, I know that we want to work collaboratively together to move forward to help people jointly. But if somebody's out there listening today and they're going through a divorce and they're saying, oh no, my divorce attorney never had me run my credit report, I haven't even heard about doing this. How should they start? Should they get a hold of you? What should they do in that case?
Well, they can get a hold of me by email is probably the best way, and that's jim@faircreditattorneys.com. Again, that's Jim, Jim, @faircreditattorneys.com. And when they email me or contact me, the first thing I'm going to ask them to do is pull their credit report. And right now you can do that for free once per week at annualcreditreport.com. So that's a place, a legit place. It's not a scam. And you can access your Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion credit reports for free once per week. And I'd ask them to do that. And then we could go through the credit report together to see how it's reporting and if anything in there is inaccurate.
Now, you mentioned the 3 different companies. Is this 3 different reports then that get generated? Because a lot of people have questions surrounding that.
Great question. And yes, there are 3 separate entities, organizations. So the first one's Equifax, the next one's Experian, and the next one's TransUnion. And all 3 are likely going to be reporting things that's slightly different. So it's important that you look at all 3. It's very often where you can find an error or errors on one of the 3 or 2 of the 3, not necessarily all of the 3.
Got it. Now, you talked about going to court for these things to, certainly get it off in those instances. But is the process first that you review it, try to get it resolved directly with the credit company first, and then only go to court as a last resort? How does that work?
Yeah, essentially court is the last resort. It's all contingency fee basis, so nobody pays me up front. We front all of the litigation costs. We generally only pursue cases that we think we're going to win because that's how we get paid. We'll get paid by the people we sue, not directly from the clients we represent. And generally, if there's an error and an inaccuracy found on a credit report, step 1 would be working with the credit reporting agency to get it removed. And that's all regulated by the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is a federal law. If you send them a dispute letter, they've got 30 days to investigate it. And how they investigate it is within 5 days, they forward it to the company reporting the information. So if you have a lease with American Honda, and you found an inaccuracy on the way Honda is reporting your lease, and you dispute it to Equifax. Equifax receives your dispute. They've got 5 days to send it to Honda. Honda will check their records, do an investigation, and then send the results to Equifax. Equifax is then supposed to do their own independent investigation, and then within 30 days of receiving it, notify you of their results. And so if they come back and they say we verified everything is accurate, but that's not correct, then that would be a claim that's worth pursuing potentially in federal court.
And then if it's found that they inaccurately reported credit, then do they have to pay your attorney's fees? Is that how that works?
Yes, but only through a settlement or favorable outcome in the litigation. So they don't pay me up front. It's all, I would get paid my attorney's fees after we sued Equifax, or in that scenario we would have sued Honda too, probably. Right. And they both would have paid damages and my attorney's fees.
And how are the damages assessed?
Well, that's a case-by-case basis. So one of the common things is when somebody's trying to obtain a mortgage, for example, and if there's a derogatory information in the credit report that's an error, and it's holding them up from getting a mortgage, and they get a denial letter because of that error, or they're paying a higher interest rate because of that error, you sort of extrapolate what the damages are worth at that point. And sometimes it's easier to understand, and sometimes it's sort of rough justice. So you have to kind of figure out, like, what is it worth? Sure. But there could be, a couple $1,000s to tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how big the error is and how bad of a problem it was, how easy it was to fix, but they just didn't fix it, correctly. So there's a wide range of damages. Now,
let's say that you get the credit repaired or you win the litigation. How long does it take really to then get yourself a clean report? So somebody's coming in there, they've got 3 errors on their report. Maybe they've got authorized user status that's being reported negatively, and you end up and you're saying, okay, I can't get a car loan because of this. What's the typical time frame for turnaround?
So the two ways to answer that. One is through the dispute letter process. It should take like 45 days. Okay. By law, they have 30 days, but you have to count, mail both ways. So it could take 45 days if there's no litigation involved. We started tracking how long our cases go from the date we file it to the date the client deposits money in their account. And on average, it's about 6 months. Okay. And oftentimes that's when they get paid, but their credit was fixed earlier on. So if the credit reporting agency does an assessment of the litigation and they can see that something's definitely reporting wrong, they'll fix it midstream. So maybe a month or two into the litigation, they'll fix the credit report, but we're still litigating the issue. So sometimes it can happen in just a couple of months, but on average, our cases are being resolved within 6 months.
And then, let's say that somebody has a bad credit score, and that's a different issue than a credit repair that you're doing in the sense of going to court to correct errors. Can you distinguish that for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I mean, credit score is very important. We all have to have a general understanding of what our score is. But if our score isn't great because we weren't great at making payments on time, there's not much I can do for you. I can't make bad accounts disappear just because you don't want them there anymore. So there's a big distinction between, low credit score because of mistakes that are there that shouldn't be there versus, decisions that you made that just have sort of negative consequences down the road.
Right. And I think that's important for people to understand. And that's a subject for another day as well. We talked about divorce. You should run your credit report before. You should run your credit report right before you start, or at the initiation of the process, and before the divorce is finalized. I think it's important also to run the report at least every 6 months thereafter, especially if there's bills and obligations that your spouse is obligated to pay where you have some liability. And I am assuming you would agree with that.
That's a great idea. Yes.
And then, but average citizen, they're not going through a divorce. They just don't pay attention. How often should we be looking at our credit report? What's our responsibility in all this? And what advice do you give to the general public on really fair credit reporting?
Yeah, every 6 months is a good idea, especially now. You can pull one really every 3 months. You could pull your Equifax credit report and see how that's reporting. If that looks good, maybe you don't pull your Experian credit report for a couple of months, then you pull it again a couple of months later. And if that's looking good, then maybe you don't pull your TransUnion report for another couple of months. But I would say 6 months is a safe way if you've got no indication that there could be something wrong. On the flip side, if you've received an email or a letter with, there's data breaches that seem to be happening every single day. It seems that all of our confidential private information is out there in the dark web somewhere. So if you're getting emails that your information was hacked because you were, I don't know, there's tons, like Home Depot had one, Target had one, Equifax had one. You should, step one, if you're concerned about identity theft issues, is to pull your credit right away, just to pull it. And not only you're looking at accounts, the trade line, they're called trade lines in your credit report. Not only are you looking at your accounts, your trade lines, but you're also looking at the inquiries. So part of your credit report will show who's pulling your credit, who's looking at it, because nobody can look at it without your permission. So if there's an inquiry and it's from some company you've never heard of, that could be a good indicator that somebody's got your identity and they're looking and trying to pull credit in your name.
And if that happens, let's say that, it's ABC, just not a generic name, and you've never heard of them before, and they pulled your credit. Is that a remedy that they could come to you for, and you can, one, make sure that gets removed from the report and somehow potentially have a claim for somebody pulling your credit improperly?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
And as far as the way I go about doing it is, one, you can do it. It's called a credit freeze. Which isn't for everybody because it requires you to be diligent with password information. But if you freeze your credit, you get a super long password information that they won't unfreeze it unless you're giving them that password. So it prevents identity theft because the identity theft person would need that super long password. So that would be something I would talk to them about whether they're sort of a good candidate to freeze their credit, and that would hopefully stop any future fraudulent inquiries down the road. And then if there are fraudulent inquiries on there, what I would do is have them file a police report and tell your local police department that somebody stole your identity. They're likely not going to do anything for you. It's not going to be some sort of quick result, but it starts the paper trail of you putting it out there to the public that somebody stole your identity. And then I would encourage you to write a dispute letter to whatever credit reporting agency that whatever ABC company access to your credit report and you didn't give them permission and attached as a police report that I submitted. And ideally, they'll remove that inquiry, because inquiries do lower your credit score, not by a lot, but they do lower. Every time somebody's pulling your credit, your score allegedly goes down a couple of points.
And is that true if you pull your own credit?
There's a soft pull and a hard pull. So if you're going to the annualcreditreport.com, that's considered a soft pull, so that does not. It's only the hard credits. So if you're in line at a Kohl's and you decide you want to get a Kohl's card, they're going to pull your credit. That's a hard pull. Okay. But if you're just doing it on annualcreditreport.com, that's a soft pull that won't negatively impact your score.
Okay, so my last question, just by way of introduction, is somebody's reading their credit report, maybe they don't understand or they think it's an error, they're just not sure. Can they call you and get a consultation to figure out what's going on, and you can give them the options at that point in time? How is that something that they should initiate the call?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take their calls to go through it, because people, if they're not, especially if they have not really looked at it before, it's a little intimidating to go through your credit report because there's just a lot of information crammed in those pages, and I can help them sort of navigate to get to the important parts, and just to make sure everything looks okay. And really, even if we only go through one, at least you've gone through one and you can have an understanding that it looks okay. And if it doesn't look okay, then we could look at all of them and sort of give them a game plan on how to fix it.
Sure. I think this is one of the issues in life that people have a responsibility to do, but it's easy to let time pass. And as we get older, we all know time goes faster and faster every year, but what an important message to everybody, because it is that valuable asset. So once again, why don't you give everybody your contact information? Because I think this is great information for anybody to have.
Sure, thanks. So my name is Jim Smith. My partner's name is Richard Doherty. We do business as the Fair Credit Attorneys. My phone number is 312-319-2879. And my email address is Jim, J-I-M, @faircreditattorneys.com. Very
good. Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and all the information you were able to share.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gwen. I really appreciate being here.
Take care.
Bye-bye.